The wind moved through the empty streets like it had nowhere else to be. Snow collected against fences, drifted across the frozen road, and wrapped the world in a silence that felt older than language. Under a broken streetlight, a man and a boy walked side by side, bundled in mismatched coats that had forgotten warmth long ago. Their names were Daniel and Sam, father and son, two travelers without a destination, moving through another winter that had stopped pretending to be kind. They had been walking for hours. The last shelter they'd found had closed its doors 3 days earlier, and the next was 30 miles away. The boy's cheeks were red, his breath trembling in the cold air. Daniel tightened his arm around him, whispering, "Just a little farther, buddy." He didn't know where farther was anymore, just that stopping wasn't an option. Hunger made his thoughts dull, but love sharpened his instincts. Every sound, the crack of ice, the shift of wind, felt like it might reveal the next piece of their survival. When the snow began to fall harder, Daniel spotted a dirt path leading off the road. A narrow trail of tire tracks vanished into the woods. "Let's try there," he said. Sam nodded silently. They followed it, stepping through the snow until the trees began to block the wind. The path curved downhill, and then half buried in white they saw it. A van. Old, rusted, tilted on one flat tire. Its paint faded to the color of forgotten dreams. The windshield was cracked, but the body was whole. It looked dead. It also looked like hope. Daniel brushed snow from the handle. The door groaned, but it opened. Inside, the air smelled of dust and oil, but it was dry miracle in itself. A sleeping bag lay in the back, stiff with age. The dashboard was cracked, and a pair of broken sunglasses rested near the steering wheel. "It's warm," Sam whispered, crawling inside. Daniel followed, shutting the door behind them. The silence that followed was almost holy. No wind, no cold, just stillness. For the first time in weeks, they didn't feel exposed. "We can stay," Daniel said, "at least for tonight." They lit a small candle in a tin cup, the flame flickering weakly. The van's windows fogged with their breath. Sam pulled the sleeping bag around them both, and Daniel watched the tiny flame dance in the reflection of the glass. "Do you think it still works?" Sam asked, nodding toward the steering wheel. Daniel smiled faintly. "Doubt it. But maybe." The boy's eyes brightened. "Then we can fix it." He said it the way children do not, as a question, but as destiny. Daniel didn't answer. Not yet. But he placed his hand on the wheel and whispered, "Maybe we can." Morning came quietly. The world outside was white, endless, and cold, but the van held the faintest echo of warmth. Frost framed the windows like lace. Daniel found a toolbox under one of the seats, rusted, but still useful. Inside were pliers, a wrench, a few screws, and a spark plug wrapped in paper. Someone had cared once. He turned it over in his hand, wondering about the person who left it there. Sam was still asleep, curled in the sleeping bag, his hand gripping a small toy car he'd carried for years, the only thing left from their old home. When Sam woke, he was smiling. "Dad, I had a dream. We were driving again. You were singing that song about the mountains." Daniel laughed quietly. "That old thing?" "Yeah," Sam said. "The one Mom liked." The air changed for a moment, heavy but gentle. Daniel nodded. "Then maybe we'll sing it again someday." He spent the rest of the morning cleaning the van, brushing snow off the roof, sweeping dust from the floor. He found a few old magazines, a thermos with a frozen crust of coffee inside, and under the seat, a small note written in pencil. "Don't give up. It still runs." He stared at the note for a long time, fingers trembling. It was as if the van itself was whispering. When he showed it to Sam, the boy's eyes widened. "Dad, it's a sign." Daniel smiled despite himself. "Maybe." They popped the hood. The engine looked ancient wires chewed, oil gone thick as tar but not hopeless. Daniel had worked construction before everything fell apart. He understood how things fit, how metal could learn to breathe again. "We'll need tools," he murmured. "And gas." Sam grinned. "Then we'll find them." It wasn't a plan. It was faith disguised as a sentence. They scavenged through the woods, finding an old shed not far away. Inside, an empty fuel can, a cracked battery, a pile of scrap metal, and a few blankets. Sam found a flashlight that still worked. "Treasure!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the trees. Daniel laughed, the sound startling even to him. It had been weeks since he'd heard his own joy. They carried their finds back to the van and arranged them neatly, like soldiers preparing for a mission. The act of organizing gave them purpose, and purpose, Daniel realized, was another word for warmth. That evening, they started a small fire in a tin barrel outside the van. The smoke rose blue against the snow. They cooked a can of soup over the flame, sharing it slowly, savoring every spoonful. Sam leaned back against his father. "Can I paint it when it works again?" "Paint what?" Daniel asked. "The van. I want it to look happy." Daniel smiled. "What color?" "Yellow," Sam said without hesitation. "Like sunlight." The word hung between them like a promise. Yellow, bright, alive. A color for people who still believed in mornings. Over the next few days, they worked. The van slowly changed from a shell into something resembling life. Daniel cleaned the spark plugs, patched the tires with scraps of rubber, and siphoned old gas from an abandoned snowblower they found behind a cabin nearby. Sam painted a crooked sun on the side, using melted snow mixed with crushed berries. It wasn't yellow exactly, but close enough. At night, they sat inside, listening to the creak of trees and the soft hum of wind. "Feels like hours," Sam said one night. Daniel looked around. "Yeah, feels like home." One morning, Daniel turned the key. The van coughed once, twice, then silence. He tried again. A click, a low growl, and then a rumble. The engine sputtered to life. Sam shouted, jumping to his feet. "It works! Dad, it works!" Daniel laughed, his hands shaking. "Yeah," he whispered, "it does." Exhaust curled from the tailpipe, smoke mixing with the cold air. The sound was rough, but beautiful, like a heart remembering how to beat. He looked at Sam. "We did it, kid," Sam grinned. "No, Dad, you did it," Daniel smiled. "We both did." They spent that afternoon driving circles around the clearing, just enough to feel motion again. The tires crunched through the snow, the engine humming low and stubborn. The radio didn't work, so they sang instead the mountain song, off-key and full of laughter. When the sun began to set, they parked near the river. The world turned gold. Sam leaned against the window, eyes heavy. "It's warm," he murmured. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, warm enough." The headlights cut through the falling snow like two bright prayers. For the first time in a long time, the road ahead didn't look endless. It looked possible. As they sat watching the light fade, Daniel thought of the people still out there under bridges, in doorways, in alleys where the wind never slept. He knew that pain. He could still feel it in his bones. "What if," Sam said softly, "we helped them?" Daniel turned. "Helped who?" "Other people. Like us." Daniel smiled faintly. "We don't have much." "Doesn't matter," Sam said. "We have wheels now." The simplicity of it hit Daniel like warmth, the kind that spreads slow but deep. Maybe this van wasn't just shelter. Maybe it was meant to move. The next morning, they drove to town. It felt strange to be moving again to see streets instead of snow, to hear the engine's low hum beneath their conversation. They parked near the edge of the market. Sam waved at people through the window, his smile bright enough to cut through the gray day. Daniel asked a shopkeeper for any leftover food. The man hesitated, then handed over 2 loaves of bread. "Take it," he said quietly. "You look like you could use a start." They drove away slowly, the smell of bread filling the air, the scent of beginnings. That night, they stopped near the highway. Trucks passed in the distance, their lights flickering like distant campfires. Daniel tore a loaf in half, handing one to Sam. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll find someone who needs this more than us." Sam nodded, serious. "We're helpers now." Daniel laughed softly. "Yeah, helpers." They ate slowly, listening to the hum of passing engines, strangers moving towards something better. Daniel didn't feel jealousy anymore, only gratitude. Somehow, the road no longer belonged to others. It belonged to them too. In the morning, they met a woman sitting near a gas station, her cart half buried in snow. She looked up, startled, when the yellow van pulled over. "Ma'am," Daniel said, "you hungry?" She blinked, unsure, then nodded. Sam handed her the other loaf of bread. "It's fresh," he said proudly. She smiled, tears bright in her eyes. "God bless you both." As they drove away, Sam stared out the window, quiet for a long time. Then he whispered, "Feels good, doesn't it?" Daniel nodded. "Yeah, kid, it really does." They painted a word across the back of the van that afternoon, crooked but bold. It said, "The Kind Van." Sam laughed as he finished the last letter. "Now everyone will know what it's for." Daniel smiled, watching the snowflakes melt on the wet paint. The van wasn't beautiful, but it was alive, covered in fingerprints, patches of sunlight, and purpose. As the wind rose again, Daniel started the engine. "Where to now?" Sam asked. Daniel thought for a moment. "Wherever someone's cold," he said. And they drove 2 wanderers, carrying warmth on wheels. That night, they parked under the same stars that had watched them suffer. The van's heater ticked softly, the candle flickered, and the snow outside glowed faintly blue. Daniel looked at his son sleeping in the front seat, his face peaceful in the amber light. He whispered, "We're not lost anymore." The van creaked in agreement. Maybe it had been waiting for them all along, for someone who'd see it not as scrap, but as shelter. And maybe, just maybe, the world was still capable of small miracles. As the wind settled and silence returned, Daniel reached for the note he'd found under the seat. "Don't give up. It still runs." He smiled, folded it carefully, and placed it on the dashboard beside the toy car. Then, in the quiet, he added a new line beneath it. "We didn't, and now it runs for everyone." Outside, the snow fell gently, wrapping the van in white. Inside, the light stayed on, steady, small, and strong. And for the first time in a long time, the night didn't feel cold at all. By the time the second week ended, the van no longer felt like a stranger they borrowed, but like a room that learned their names. Daniel measured the back with a piece of twine and a pencil nub, marking where a narrow bed might fit without bruising shins, and where a shelf could sit without stealing headroom. Sam drew plans on a pizza box he'd rescued from a bin, labeling spots in careful, blocky letters: BED, books, soup, toys. The heater ticked like a soft metronome. Outside, winter pressed its ear against the windows. Inside, they answered with work, warm and patient. They rebuilt the space in layers, the way hope sometimes arrives. First, a platform bed from 2 pallets and a door salvaged from a curb. Daniel sanded the edges until splinters surrendered. Then, shallow shelves cut from a broken bookcase, each screwed into ribs they found beneath the van's thin skin. Grace didn't exist in their world as a person anymore, but she did as a standard: no wobbles, no rattles, no sharp corners. Sam tied a length of twine across the window to hang socks and notes. When the engine ran, the shelves hummed slightly, like they approved the arrangement. They made a kitchen out of a crate and a camp stove that coughed until Daniel replaced a gasket with a slice of bicycle tube. A dented kettle lived there like a small moon. Sam painted icons beside each spot cup, pan, spoon, so that even in darkness they could find what mattered. They added a narrow drawer that slid like a secret. Inside went matches, a pencil, a roll of tape, a folded scrap where Daniel wrote fuel, water, bread, and left 3 blank lines for whatever kindness might ask next. They began to feel less like passengers and more like stewards. The outside needed a new beginning too. Sam scrubbed the van's sides with snow and rags until gray surrendered to a dull, stubborn white. Over a weekend of pale sunlight, they painted the panels with borrowed house paint, uneven, but bright enough to catch the gloom and wring light from it. Across the back, where he'd written the kind van in berry-stained letters, Sam now traced the words again in yellow from a nearly empty can. The K tilted like it was smiling. People at gas stations stared. Some frowned, some waved. The van learned to return only what it wanted to keep. They chose routes not by maps but by rumors: where the wind was meanest, where a shelter had closed, where someone had seen a bundle of blankets near the edge of a lot. Their first day, on duty, Daniel called it. They bought coffee in a cardboard carrier and drove slow along the river. Sam spotted a figure under the overpass, an older man with hands wrapped in plastic bags. Daniel parked, killed the engine, and opened the door to the cold. "Sir," he said gently, holding out a steaming cup. "It's on the house. Our house moves." The man's eyes watered with relief. Word traveled the way it always does when kindness refuses to whisper. A mechanic noticed him idling one afternoon and walked over, wiping his hands on a rag. "That alternator sounds like an old prayer," he said. "Bring it round back." Daniel hesitated, feeling the distance between charity and debt. The man shrugged. "I grew up in a van when my dad was sorting himself out. Call this interest paid late." He cleaned the contacts, tightened a belt, and wouldn't take cash. Instead, he asked for a favor. "If you see Angela by the bus station, give her this scarf." They did. Inside the rear doors, Daniel taped a new rule where only they would see it. "Leave better than we arrived." It meant small things: picking up trash in a camp they visited, replacing the batteries in a shelter's smoke alarm, leaving a pair of socks on a bench that always held cold feet. It meant bigger things, too: driving a man to his probation meeting on time, calling a mobile clinic when an infected cut needed more than sympathy. They learned names, not labels. They learned birthdays, not intake numbers. The van kept those secrets like a chapel on wheels. The first time they ran a route, Sam wore a hat too big and a grin that fit just right. He kept a ledger in a school notebook someone donated. 2 coffees, 1 ride, 3 blankets, 1 laugh. He counted laughter because it measured something the notes couldn't. At a park where benches faced a frozen pond, a woman asked, "Why the yellow?" Sam answered before Daniel could, "So it looks like sunshine even when the sky forgets." She told them she hadn't heard her name spoken kindly in weeks. Daniel said it back to her twice, like a gift returned. They learned how to stock the van like a pantry for emergencies the world pretended not to see. Under the bed, gallon jugs of water tucked in like sleeping seals, a plastic bin of socks in sizes that guess right more than wrong, a stack of cheap hand warmers that felt like victory when they crackled alive. On the shelf, instant soup, peanut butter, bandages, a little sewing kit that turned a torn coat into a coat with a story. Sam taped drawings, simple diagrams for how to wrap a hand, how to clean a cut so dignity wouldn't have to ask twice. One icy morning, they rolled past a bus stop where a young man shivered in a t-shirt, arms wrapped tight. Daniel pulled over. "Hop in to warm up," he said. The man hesitated, scanning their faces for hooks in the offer. Finding none, he climbed in. He said his name was Caleb, and he'd aged out of a care home with a backpack and a bus schedule that always ran late. Sam poured cocoa from a thermos, eyes wide with listening. "We can drop you near the clinic," Daniel offered. Caleb nodded, then asked if he could leave his name in the ledger. He needed to exist somewhere. Not everyone approved. A security guard tapped the window one evening. Skeptical frowns steamed by his own breath. "You running a service?" he asked. "Just running on kindness," Daniel said. The guard looked at the painted words, the crooked sun, the shelves that somehow looked official by being tidy. "No permits for that," he muttered. Daniel kept his voice gentle. "We aren't selling, sir. We're warming." After a long pause, the guard sighed. "Park in the far lot next time. Folks complain when good things happen too close to their comfort." They thanked him like he'd granted them a license in plain clothes. They began to leave small notes taped under windshield wipers, and beside library doors, nothing dramatic, just words someone might need at the exact minute they found them. "You matter. This cold is not the future. Meet us here at noon if you need a ride." They signed every note the same way. The kind van. On Fridays, they started a ritual called the round trip, circling from the shelter to the food bank, to the laundromat, to the clinic, and back. A quiet loop that stitched freight days together for anyone who climbed aboard for 20 minutes of warmth and a plan. Inside, the van gathered small artifacts, like a museum of second chances. A knitted square from a woman who'd ridden twice and insisted someone else needed it more. A Polaroid of a man holding up his new ID card, grin crooked with disbelief. A keychain shaped like a lighthouse given by a fisherman who promised to wave when he saw their yellow blur by the docks. Sam hung the lighthouse from the rearview mirror, and it clicked softly over bumps, a tiny beacon that required no electricity. Daniel started touching it before hard conversations. It became their habit to seek light before speaking. Winter deepened until every breath drew a white line. That's when the van met its first big test. A cold snap cut the city like glass. They found a camp by the river where tarps sagged under ice robes, and a woman coughed so hard she leaned on sound to stay upright. Daniel called the mobile clinic, no answer, circuits busy with too much need. He drove to the fire station instead, palms sweating, fear of official doors still heavy in his bones. He explained fast and politely. The captain said, "Lead us." with the voice adults use when they decide to be brave on purpose. They followed the engine's red kindness through streets that forgot to be friendly years ago. Medics checked lungs, wrapped blankets from the ambulance stash around shoulders, handed out orange knit hats like rare birds. The woman's cough slowed. She asked Daniel why he cared. He said, "Because someone left a note in a van that should have been junk, and it felt like an order masquerading as permission." She smiled, small but real, and told him her name twice, so he'd remember. Later, the fire captain clapped Daniel's shoulder. "Keep doing your rounds," he said. "We'll call your number when lines jam." Their number, of course, was a prepaid phone with minutes rationed like coffee. Even so, connection multiplied. A bakery began setting aside end-of-day loaves. The laundromat let them run a free wash on Tuesdays if they filled the machine with jackets that would otherwise sleep damp. The mechanic with the scarf showed Daniel how to swap a serpentine belt and then left one in a paper bag under a code name for Sunshine Bus. They slipped thank you notes everywhere, small rectangles that said so little and meant so much. Gratitude became their fuel when gas receipts made hands go quiet. On a rare bright Sunday, they hosted what Sam called a parking lot picnic, which was really just 3 folding chairs, a jug of hot soup, and a sign that read, "Free balls, no questions." Questions came anyway, but the kind they liked. "What's in it? Can I help?" "Who painted the sun?" A little girl from the apartments tugged Sam's sleeve and asked if she could draw on the van. Daniel hesitated, then handed her a marker. She drew a tiny heart in a corner and whispered, "For my mom." The van held it like a secret tattoo, visible only to the attentive. Their evenings ended with rituals. They inventoried shelves by touch, logged the day's miles and mercies, and read a page from a battered book someone had left on the seat essays about ordinary goodness that made Daniel's throat ache. Sam added symbols to the ledger for stories words couldn't carry. A star for laughter, a wave for goodbye, a small circle for eye contact that didn't flinch. Before sleep, Daniel checked the tires and placed a spare blanket at the foot of the bed, just in case kindness had one more visitor after midnight. The heater ticked approval. Snow stitched the dark closed. Near month's end, they found a cardboard sign by the exit ramp that simply read, "Home soon" in a hand, braver than circumstance. The man holding it wore a jacket too thin and an apology too heavy. Daniel asked where soon lived. "Bus ticket tomorrow," the man said. "Just need a place to be warm until then." The van became that place for 2 hours, then for 4, then overnight in the far lot, the guard nodding them through with a chin tilt. That meant kind men can bend small rules and stay human. In the morning, they drove the man to his bus. As winter began to loosen its grip, Daniel taped a new card beside the dashboard note they'd found weeks ago. Under "Don't give up." "It still runs," he added in steadier letters. "We didn't. Now it carries more than us." Sam tucked the toy car next to it, as if to agree. The kind van idled at the curb, yellow sides reflecting a sky that finally remembered blue. They had driven kindness in circles until the circle held. Ahead waited longer roads, spring rains, new faces, and repairs they hadn't learned yet, but that was fine. They'd figure it out together, one warm mile at a time. Spring crept in shyly, with puddles for punctuation and mud that tried to hold the van's tires hostage. Daniel didn't mind. Every squeak and splatter meant life returning, proof the cold hadn't won. The kind van wore its dents like medals now, yellow sides faded, roof patched with duct tape shaped like hearts, a mosaic of small survivals. Sam kept count of days, not by calendars, but by faces. The old man by the bridge who waved, the bakery girl who packed extra rolls, the park kids who called it the sunshine bus. The world was beginning to recognize them not as broken, but as bright. They drove slower now, by choice. Each mile was less escape, more arrival. The towns blurred together into kindness and repetition. Refill thermos, restock bread, tighten bolts, remind themselves that this mission had grown beyond repair. The back of the van smelled like soap, oil, and fresh bread, the holy trinity of second chances. At night, Daniel read stories aloud from donated books, his voice low and patient. Sam often fell asleep halfway through a chapter, head on his father's shoulder. Daniel would keep reading anyway, because sometimes words are prayers disguised as stories, meant as much for the speaker as the listener. A small article appeared one morning, printed on recycled paper and taped to a gas station window. The yellow van that helps. Someone had written it after spotting them near the market, describing two wanderers whose wheels carry warmth. Daniel read it twice before showing Sam. The boy's grin stretched wide. "We're famous!" he laughed. Daniel chuckled. "Let's hope not too famous. Fame gets in the way of doing good quietly." Still, he folded the clipping and slipped it into the glove box beside the note that started it all. Every movement begins with one word. Theirs had always been run, and now it ran on kindness. That afternoon, as they handed out sandwiches by the lake, a woman approached holding a camera. "I'm from the community center," she said. "People talk about you. Would you come by next week? We'd like to help officially." Daniel hesitated, used to helping unseen, but her eyes were kind, not calculating. Sam nudged him. "We should go, Dad." He nodded slowly. "All right, but only if we bring soup." She laughed, wrote down an address, and said, "Bring plenty. It'll be a big crowd." The way she said crowd felt like invitation, not warning. For once, Daniel looked forward to being found. The community center was a converted warehouse near the river, bright murals climbing its walls like optimism that refused to fade. Inside, volunteers sorted boxes of clothes and canned food. A banner read, "One town, one table." When the kind van rolled up, people paused their work, curious. Daniel and Sam stepped out, carrying a pot of soup and 2 loaves of bread. "We heard you could use an extra pair of hands," Daniel said. The coordinator smiled. "Looks like 4 to me." Laughter broke the ice, and just like that, the kind van became part of something larger, less lonely, more lasting. They spent the day helping pack care kits, soap, socks, snacks. Sam ran between tables like a spark, his laughter loosening the solemn air that often hangs where good deeds are measured. A local reporter asked Daniel if he'd share his story. He looked toward Sam, then back at her. "There's not much story," he said. "Just 2 people who didn't want to freeze. Everything else grew out of that." She smiled. "That's enough of a story for anyone." The next morning, their faces appeared on the center's bulletin board under a handwritten caption. "The helpers who keep rolling." More vans joined them over the next month, an old blue one from a retired nurse, a white cargo van run by a pair of college kids who called themselves the Spare Change Crew. The group grew slowly, like vines searching for Sunday. They met every Saturday to trade supplies, routes, and stories. Daniel became the quiet center of it all, fixing engines, teaching others to build shelves, showing how to stretch fuel money without losing dignity. Sam handled the art painting suns and hearts on every vehicle that asked, Soon, the city's backstreets glowed like sunrise, even after dark. With growth came new challenges. Some nights, the van needed repairs they couldn't afford. Some days, exhaustion sank deeper than cold ever had. Daniel kept a log of every breakdown, mechanical or moral, and next to each, he wrote how they fixed it. Alternator, patience, confidence, hot soup, hope, music. The ledger became scripture in grease and ink. Sam added drawings. The dog that chased their tires, the kid with the red kite, the fire captain waving them through traffic like saints on duty. The pages smelled faintly of gasoline and good intentions, proof that faith sometimes leaks a little and still runs fine. One evening, after a long route, they parked by the river where this all began. The snow was gone, but the water still whispered the same tune. Daniel sat on the hood, eyes following the current. "You ever think about staying somewhere?" Sam asked softly. Daniel sighed. "Sometimes, but I'm not sure the world's done needing the van yet." Sam kicked a pebble into the river. "Maybe we can do both, stay and help." Daniel smiled. "You might be onto something, kid." He didn't know then that life was already preparing the answer, waiting just a few miles ahead. The next morning, a letter arrived at the community center addressed simply, "To the Kind Van." Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small brass key. The note read, "This belonged to my brother. He ran a repair shop before he passed. He believed in people like you. The shop's been empty since last year. The rent's paid till summer. If you want it, it's yours. Use it to fix more than engines." Daniel held the key like something alive. "It's the same symbol," Sam whispered, pointing to the faint engraving on the bow, a tiny sunburst. Their sign had found them back. They drove to the address that afternoon. The building stood at the edge of town. Brick walls faded, sign half missing. Raised guard, the rest lost to time. Inside, dust waited patiently. Tools hung still where someone's hands had last left them. The smell was oil, metal, and ghosts. "Looks like it's been waiting for work," Daniel murmured. Sam ran a finger along a dusty wrench. "We can fix it." Daniel laughed softly. "You always say that." "Because it's true," Sam answered, grinning. The echo of their voices filled the garage, like the sound of belonging stretching its arms. They spent a week cleaning, mopping the concrete floor, airing out years of silence. Volunteers from the center helped patch the roof. The mechanic with the scarf donated a new compressor. Even the bakery girl brought boxes of pastries for fuel. Sam painted the same crooked sun above the door, bright against the red brick. Underneath, in careful letters, "The Kind Garage," a place to fix anything. They hung the original dashboard note on the wall. "Don't give up, it still runs." Below it, Daniel added, "So do we." And just like that, a movement had a home. Soon, the garage became more than a workshop. It turned into a meeting place where stories were traded like spare parts. A veteran learned to weld again. A teenager fixed bikes for kids. A woman rebuilt a sewing machine and used it to make blankets for others. Daniel taught anyone who asked, patient as sunrise. He found himself laughing more than thinking, a sign the mind had finally stopped measuring loss and started counting gain. The van still rolled out each morning, but now it returned to somewhere that waited 4 walls, a key, and a sign that said welcome. One evening, after closing, Sam found a box under a workbench labeled Ray's Notes. Inside were pages of advice scrawled in pencil. Grease first, question later. Always listen for the quiet noises. Engines tell the truth, if you let them. At the bottom lay a faded photograph. Ray standing with a younger man who looked eerily like Daniel. On the back, for those who fix things they didn't break. Daniel stared at it for a long time. Maybe the world was smaller than he thought. Or maybe goodness simply circles until it finds the same kind of hands again. That summer, the Kind Garage hosted its first repair day. People lined up not just with engines, but with everything. Broken chairs, watches, radios, even hearts disguised as appliances. Daniel refused payment. Instead, he asked each person to leave something small behind, a word, a photo, a note for the wall. By sunset, the bricks were covered in paper, every message written in a different hand. Some said thank you, some said nothing but a name. Together, they looked like a mosaic of voices declaring quietly, "We're still here." Sam called it the wall of running things, and no one argued. One afternoon, as they closed up shop, a social worker approached. "You've helped half the people on my caseload," she said with a tired smile. "How about helping officially? The city wants to fund mobile outreach." Daniel blinked, half amused, half wary. "You mean pay us to do what we're already doing?" "Exactly," she said. "Except with more gas money." He laughed. "I'll need to think about it." She nodded. "Take your time, but know this. Hope travels best with fuel." When she left, Sam grinned. "Guess we're professionals now." Daniel chuckled. "Guess so. Kindness with a paycheck, who'd have thought?" Months passed in a rhythm of purpose. Mornings smelled of oil and coffee, afternoons of sun-warmed metal. The van, though older, ran smoother than ever, its engine humming like gratitude. Daniel caught his reflection in the window one day and barely recognized a man bearded, sure-footed, eyes no longer tired but steady. Sam, taller now, wore confidence like a second coat. Together they planned new routes, shelters outside the city, small towns forgotten by maps. Wherever they went, people smiled when they saw yellow. Some waved. Others just placed a hand over their hearts, silent acknowledgement that good still roamed the roads. On the first anniversary of finding the van, they drove back to the forest road where it all began. Snow had returned, gentle this time, like a friend who learned manners. They parked by the old tracks, now softened by moss and memory. Daniel stepped out, breath visible, heart full. He placed a small wooden sign in the ground. Here hope started moving. Sam added the toy car beside it. The wind carried their laughter through the trees. For a moment, time folded neatly past, and present shaking hands under a quiet, forgiving sky. As they headed home, headlights carving gold paths through the snow, Daniel said softly, "You know, we could have stopped anywhere that night." Sam looked up. "Yeah, but the van was waiting for us." Daniel nodded. Maybe everything good is waiting for someone to believe in it again. The engine hummed in agreement. Outside, the world was still cold, still imperfect, but no longer indifferent. They had built something that moved hearts as easily as it moved wheels. Every mile now felt like a verse in a song they hadn't finished singing yet. Back at the garage, Daniel parked and turned off the engine. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, settled, proud. He looked at Sam, who was already half asleep. "We made it home," Daniel whispered. On the wall, the first note watched over them. "Don't give up. It still runs." Beneath it hung dozens more proof of every life the kind van had touched. Outside, dawn stretched across the horizon, painting everything gold. And when the engine started again the next morning, it sounded like laughter, a reminder that sometimes when you keep moving long enough, kindness drives you home.